See how this here thing works out.
We'll see how it goes.
And grabbing some sunlight earlier helped kind of get moving and clear the headache.
Yeah.
Is 1 o'clock. Hey, Tim, how goes it? So we'll give it a few minutes, let everybody trickle in, and then we will kick this shindig off.
I just started the event on Core Stack, so it should be live for the labs.
Coo, 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 coo. Hey, everybody. So we'll give it till about 5 after.
Give it about two more minutes. To try, you see, I finally hung up the Rooster Jordan.
Yeah, it's so good, dude. I love
Yeah,
that
it's
post.
it's pretty awesome. I had to turn my light off though because it reflects on the light when I'm on camera, but I like it a lot.
Yeah, I could see the glass giving you a big reflection.
Hmm.
You almost need like a matte panel or something that doesn't reflect like that.
Yeah. This is the first time I've been on camera, and since I've hung it up, so I just haven't noticed. But yeah, because that one and a little dog here for Hemingway, that one's kind of washed out too.
Yeah. You've got big above lights too, don't you though? Like the
Yeah.
industrial lights.
Hmm. All right. About one more minute and we will kick it off, everybody. All righty. Well, I see 5 after, so we're not gonna keep anybody else holding on. Hello, everybody. Welcome to our Blacksuit emulation workshop. Throughout this workshop, we're going to talk a little bit about Blacksuit, going to look at some CTI, some cyber threat intelligence. We're going to then translate our cyber threat intelligence that we gather. We're going to translate it into our threat emulation plan. We're going to deploy that threat, and then we are going to see if we can detect the activity that happened. So kind of an all-in-one kind of uh, purple team exercise almost for this one threat actor. So it should be a lot of fun. With that, um, hello, I am Tyler Casey. I am the lead detection engineer over here at Scythe and the deputy of Scythe Labs. A little background on me. I have about 10 years of experience doing DCO, which is defensive cyber operations. Currently, I run the blue or the defensive side of our purple team engagements, and I'm responsible for a lot of the threats that we put out every month and the subsequent detections that go along with them. Before I came to Scythe, I was on a CPT, which is a cyber protection team, where I deployed internationally for incident response and targeted threat hunting operations. Have some of my socials and LinkedIn up here on the slide if anybody wants to connect. I would love to chat.
Hey everybody, I'm Trey. If you've not seen me before, I'm the lead emulation engineer over here at Scythe and the head of Scythe Labs. Quick background, 15 plus years in IT and cyber as a whole, doing everything from red teaming to defensive cyber operations with Tyler up here. Threat hunting, I've done some work as a SOC analyst, consulting. I've done a lot of content creation, and I have Alphabet Soup if you care about that. Again, socials are at the bottom if you would like to connect. With all of that formal stuff out of the way, what are we talking about? Tyler hinted at it a bit already earlier. We're going to be covering Blacksuit today. We thought this one would be a really cool threat to kind of walk people through as an actor, but also as a means of showing them how to do threat emulation. So they're kind of a very open actor. They target a bunch of different places, so this isn't a very niche group to talk about, which makes it really interesting and really useful for this kind of a course. We'll talk about who they are, what they like to target, what they tend to do. We'll dive a bit into CTI, how to operationalize it, taking good reporting and turning it into an actual emulation plan. And then actually doing that threat emulation. From there, we're going to dive into, okay, well, now I know how to be the threat. How can I find them in my organization? And that's pretty much what we're covering today. If you guys have any questions as we go through this, feel free to pop it down in chat or in QA. If you have any comments, concerns, problems like that, let us know. One quick admin note. You would have gotten an email from CourseStack. That email has the access link for you to get into the lab environment. Within there, we have a full AD environment set up for you, access to all of the tools, documents, things like that that you're going to need, along with the course manual is within that. So make sure you go ahead, check that link, and spin up the environment. It can take a few minutes. So let's get moving. So who is Blacksuit? So this meme kind of sums it up all in one right here. Tyler brought this one in. The whole where are they? Well, who are they or why are they? There's a lot to them. They're a very, very cool organization. They're kind of a weird spinoff, and we're going to dive into them a little bit more right now. So Blacksuit themselves, this is a ransomware group that's believed to have spun off of Royal in mid to late 2023. They've been very active for almost 8 years now, I want to say, pretty much. They're all over the place. They're a private group. There's no real country affiliation assigned to them, like from a government perspective, but they are believed to be of Eastern European and Russian descent. A lot of their group is out of those regions. Who do they target? Well, the easy answer here is anyone and everyone. Some of the most commonly seen and attributed are in the healthcare, education, manufacturing, and financial services. Two of their most prominent happen to also be in the media niche, so working in like television, global media, things like that, as well as the government sector. It hasn't been completely confirmed by the government, but it's also attributed they potentially are the reason the Brazilian government was compromised a few years back. Their motivation, it's purely money. That's all they care about. They're trying to get in, get some data, take it away, make you pay them for it. That's their end goal. And to date, they're well over 500 million in revenue from their perspective. So they're pretty active, they're pretty sophisticated when it comes to threat actors, and they have a wide range of targets and capabilities. So this will be a pretty cool one to dive into a bit from a CTI perspective today. So next, a little bit of their TTPs. We'll give you a quick high-level overview, but throughout this workshop, we're going to allow you to kind of explore this on your own and dig in and get really down into the weeds with what they do from a TTP or behavioral perspective. Initial access, they tend to be very, very commonly seen doing phishing, some kind of compromising RDP connections using RMM tools, or just exploiting public-facing services and finding a foothold in. From there, they like to move and elevate, typically using valid accounts. They live off the land. Common privilege escalation techniques. They're not doing anything sneaky, anything crazy here. They tend to live by typical tradecraft. They're not investing a ton of time and effort into crazy capabilities developed from this perspective. They like data, they want to take data, and they want to extort you for it. So they tend to encrypt and exfiltrate files. For their evasion piece, they mess with logs, they do deleting of system backups and shadow copies, things like that. And then last but not least, the whole point being ransomware group is they do their encryption piece, drop their ransom notes, letting you know, hey, you didn't do a very good job protecting your stuff from their perspective. And then they get you to pay the ransom. When you do, they then threaten to leak those files if you don't pay them again. So they like the whole double extortion method. With all this in mind, that's a quick little wrap up of who they are, what they target, some of their common TTPs. We're going to dive in next here throughout this workshop on how can we find some CTI pertaining to this group and turn it into something actionable. With that, we've got a few slides for you guys before you get into the hands-on portion that'll kind of walk you through this process and how we look at it. Tyler?
Yeah, for sure. So, like Trey had said, we're gonna, we gave a little bit of an overview of what Blacksuit is, but the main real point of this workshop, we're gonna do it in the labs, is to find our own intelligence, create our own plan, which we can then, action to do some threat emulation. So to do that, we're first gonna start with operationalizing CTI. So we know the adversary that we want to emulate, Blacksuit, but we're going to need to gather some actionable intelligence to excuse me, hello. We're going to need to gather some actionable intelligence that we will then turn into procedures and behaviors and things like that, which will go into our threat plan.
So we've said this word a lot, actionable. What does that mean, Tyler?
So that's a great little segue into it. So actionable, we need clear, actionable reporting that is going to show us tactics, tools, and behaviors that are used by the threat. Most importantly, we want to make sure that the CTI is going to cover context as to how and why. So kind of first up here on the left, it's not very helpful, right? It's a lot of text. It's not a lot of commands. It's all very broad. All very broad kind of strategic level CTI, if you guys are familiar with the different forms of CTI, but it's very high level, like like a thousand eye view.
Yeah, it's like an
So there's
executive brief.
Yep, yeah, like an executive brief. It's not really something that you could then take and turn into what we call actionable intelligence. It doesn't have anything for you to really emulate in there. It's just kind of a broad overview, right? But then over to the right, it's getting a little bit better. We can see some tactics that are listed. We can see some T codes on there. We see words like enumeration. We see host name configurations, persistence, deleting log files, things like that. So getting a little bit more actionable. It's providing us with some context into what's going on, but we're still going to need to kind of fill the gaps in a lot of this. There's nothing here we can like copy and paste and just run with, right? It's going to take a little bit more extrapolation, a little more synthesizing of different reports and things like that. But that takes us into our best case scenario, which is really what we're looking for. This is like the definition of actionable intelligence, right? We see that the commands are listed out. It provides us with a little bit of context as to the how and what. We can see that the adversary has been observed running net commands to stop EDR and AV services. This action with the context shows us that they are probably most likely trying to disable potential roadblocks for their actual actions on objectives they'll perform later down the road. So we could see that this is probably a precursor, what they do in the beginning, maybe after they do some discovery commands or something like that, some enumeration attempts that they want to get in and stop all of this AV and EDR services, so then they could do more malicious actions later on without being stopped or you being alerted. So again, this is the best case scenario of what we're looking for. Something between what we have over here on the right and something that we have here. Something in between the two is really what we're looking for as far as actionable intelligence.
Now, mind you, as we're going through this today, guys, this workshop is an inch deep, mile wide on several different topics, namely CTI, threat emulation, and detection engineering. So if these kind of topics are feeling kind of fast to you, that's kind of on purpose. If you want to learn more in these sections, we run other workshops throughout the year, specifically dealing with how to find and develop your own CTI, how to do threat emulation in depth, as well as hunting through the seam and detection engineering. So if you feel like you're being rushed a bit or you're missing something, we have others you can check out as well, where we deep dive way more. But
Yes.
with me saying that, Tyler, where can they find good CTI?
Man, you're just like lead me right along. I love this. So where can you find some quality CTI? If you don't have access to closed source intelligence, also know, your CTI subscriptions, if you don't pay for them, that is no problem. There is plenty of quality free CTI sources, excuse me, sources out there that we have listed up over here. Trey and I use these sources all the time to try to create threats, emulate threats, things like that. I typically start my workday with the infosec ninja start.me page. It's got plenty of up-to-date information on there. It's the image that we have available here, where everything is up to date. It's all in one stop. It's all the RSS feeds, so you can just go through and just easily click on what you're trying to find. I will drop a link to all of these in the chat over here, so you guys have them. But yeah, highly recommend checking these out. Some of note that really they all do a good job, right? But really above and beyond is the CISA alerting is incredible. The DFIR reporting is incredible. Those two we have referenced in our lab environment. We'll be using their CTI to create our threat emulation plan in a little bit. And then MITRE ATT&CK is always, a one-stop shop. They come with a bunch of resources into their reporting and groups and T codes and everything else. MITRE ATT&CK is also just a great resource that everybody knows and uses, and the lexicon is kind of dispersed across our community, right?
And thing to think about here, CISA, their alerts and advisories, like Tyler said, they are amazing. Honestly, the stuff they do over the last 2 years has been great watching it change and develop. They're a little bit on the faster side. They're putting out 1 to 7 posts daily about specific threat groups or actors or things they're seeing in the wild and that's being reported. The DFIR report's a little slower. They're not putting stuff out on that kind of a speed, but what they are putting out is very in-depth. It tends to go a lot deeper into kind of the forensics piece, diving into malware and executables found and other pieces and parts to really give you the why they did a thing that way, not just here's what we've seen. Again, MITRE ATT&CK Unit 42. Unit 42 is a great one, just like Google Tag. They put out a lot of their own flavored reporting. Naming can be weird, so sometimes you need to check the Rosetta Stone to make sure everything's lining up. But MITRE ATT&CK, if you have no feeds currently for CTI and know where to start, and you're thinking about threat emulation or other items, MITRE ATT&CK is the best place to go. Under their groups tab, they've got tons of historic data for all kinds of different threat actors and um, things for you to potentially emulate or to even attempt to defend against. So check them out. If anything, if you don't look at the rest of this stuff, at least go look at the MITRE ATT&CK groups. It's a lot of updates, a lot of cool stuff.
For sure. And then if you guys have any CTI feeds or reports or sites that you like, if you want to throw them in the chat, and maybe we can update our quality CTI slide here. Always interested in how other people are finding their intelligence outside of just Googling it, right? If you have any other site or any other company that really does a good job of providing in-depth analysis, I would really be interested to see it. All right, but so we have our CTI. It's great. Everything's perfect. But CTI is not perfect, and there will sometimes be hurdles that you're going to need to overcome, right? The first of those being that CTI is often historic. Kind of by nature, it has to be. You can only document and report on what's been observed, and if it hasn't happened yet, you can't write a report on it, right? So CTI kind of happened and been observed, right? And also, kind of a takeaway maybe from it being historic is that the current data that you see or the current reports that you see from about the adversary might not represent their current capabilities. I think we often see the same TTPs kind of persist over honestly probably even decades. We've seen some reporting from threat actors where it's 10 years apart and it is the exact same TTP that they're doing. The only thing that changes is that the procedures might be different or the tools might be a little different. But with all of that, the current data might not represent their current capabilities and it might be a little bit outdated as adversary behaviors can change over time, right? And then we also find that CTI often doesn't provide you with a complete picture. Not everything that's going on, not everything the adversary is doing is going to be observed or documented. So you might have to make some assumptions or hypothesize what happened in order to fill in those gaps, right? You might need to synthesize multiple different reports from multiple different companies or articles or intelligence drops or whatever it is to try to make a full emulation plan. You often won't find just a one-stop shop that has everything that you need, right? And the last part of it not providing a complete picture is that researchers might not always understand the tooling and tactics used. Not all of the people that write up these reports are technical analysts or something like that. Their job could just be to write up some of the observations. So sometimes they'll make assumptions that might not necessarily be exactly what happened, or they might misinterpret what the adversary is doing. So, you need to just put it on with, trust but verify and kind of read the report. And if you think that something is off, use your better judgment, use your experience, trust yourself and kind of build off of that, right? And then on the topic of assumptions, we do hear some unsafe assumptions about CTI that we do want to point out because we think that it could be of value to you. The first one that we hear is that threat actors or APTs only used advanced techniques. That could not be further from the truth. I would say more often than not, at least in the reporting that we see, which again is just what people observe and document. But in most of the reporting that we see, living off the land, PowerShell execution that's what adversaries are doing, right? It's sneakier, it's cheap, they don't have to download anything, it's already on the system. So yeah, the kind of preconceived notion that an APT is going to have, which is an advanced persistent threat, typically like a nation state actor, that they're going to have just tons of money, tons of advanced techniques, tons of advanced tools. You're going to need $1 billion product to find that is not really the case. More than likely, and most of the time, it's those living off the land techniques. It's PowerShell. It's VBS macros. It's things like that, right?
Yeah,
Um,
they're spending time and money in cultivating resources, people, like gaining that initial access, finding
yes,
someone inside to compromise an organization. And then on the technical side, they're spending all of their time, effort, and money on developing that truly advanced, say, piece of malware that's going to be for that 0 day or their ransomware variant, things like that. They're not spending time and effort to dev out a new way to do SMB lateral movement. There's so many free and open source tools out there already that already work. Why would they do that, right? So that's
yeah,
just something to keep in mind there.
for sure. And then we like to bring that up when we talk about threat emulation because people also think that they need to go out and buy the most expensive, C2 product, or that they need to go get some crazy capability or some dev or something like that. Utilize what you have and what you know and the living off the land techniques. You can expand later on. Adversaries are using the stuff that's easy. There's no reason why you shouldn't be using that stuff as well, right? And then the next unsafe assumption that we hear a lot about CTI is that the threat feeds that people are using and paying for are comprehensive and current. Find that is just not true. Just relying on your threat feeds itself can create some blind spots. Um, can create blind spots. It's good to have those threat feeds and update them, and put in the IOCs and things like that that come from them, but they are not going to be wholly comprehensive because every company gets a little piece of something. You know, you need to have um, multiple feeds, do your own kind of research, be kind of be proactive in there trying to find your own stuff that might not be included just in your thread feeds. And then the last unsafe assumption that we hear is that we already know who our adversaries are. Um, and by that, not as in the naming of your adversary or groups that may target you, but in we know that APT XX or Blacksuit is going to target us because of XYZ. It's really more about understanding their TTPs and knowing that their TTPs will shift. So your thread landscape is going to kind of constantly shift and evolve based off the technologies that you have and what your company is doing and the different vulnerabilities that come out and things like that. So you just need to continually monitor for new adversaries and their new TTPs and then kind of reevaluate what your threat landscape is.
That's a good point there, Tyler. You as an organization determine the threat you face, the security measures you implement, all of the tooling, the hardware, the policies and procedures, the way you do business, who you do business with. That's going to dictate the threats you face. You're not going to face some crazy sophisticated threat actor that's targeting healthcare if you're in education. Like these kind of things don't often overlap unless it's someone, again, like Blacksuit here, who just doesn't care who their target is. They're just trying to make money. So having a good, clear understanding of your organization, how you operate, and those you interact with. So do you have anybody in your actual supply chain that might actually be a target or a way into you? Understanding all of this will really help you from this CTI perspective and understanding your threats.
For sure. And then on to the next one, kind of maybe not a CTI hurdle, but maybe a mix of those CTI hurdles as well as that actionable intelligence that we were talking about. Sometimes you're gonna have to dig a little more into the CTI or use some context, your experience, things like that to fill in some gaps when you're trying to extrapolate these procedures from your reporting. So in this example, we see that the CTI reports an adversary is utilizing VSS admin to delete shadow copies prior to encryption. It doesn't say exactly how they do it. It just says that they use VSS admin to achieve that. So again, you could rely on synthesizing some more reports to try to find out what exact procedure or command the adversary is running. Or if you can't find that, you could again rely on your own experience and research and things like that and come up with an emulation procedure that most closely resembles his adversary action. So that's kind of what we did here in the breakdown below. See that SMB could have been on Windows natively. They could have created a network share mapping or just utilized an already existing network share mapping. Or they could have downloaded an SMB client. Some examples of how they could have got that SMB or how they could have got that malware distributed over SMB. Again, we had pointed out earlier that they like to live off the land. So I think it's more than likely that they're probably utilizing net commands or some kind of PowerShell commandlet to create a network share or just piggyback off of a network share that already exists, right? That $C share is by default on is by default enabled on all Windows systems, right? So they could have more than likely just utilized some living off the land techniques to then propagate the executable across the environment. Next up, we see that they also utilize RDP to remote desktop into a machine to manually execute the ransomware. RDP is a living off the land technique, just like we said. So we could kind of assume that they're just going to use RDP or MSTSC to launch an interactive graphical window into the next device that they're trying to execute this malware on. And then last up, we see that, or again, that VSS admin is utilized to delete shadow copies. It doesn't exactly say how they did that, but we decided from our experience in researching other ransomware threat groups that they're gonna want to get rid of all the shadow copies. Shadow copies are essentially a backup on a Windows system. So if you're going to encrypt the file system, you're going to encrypt all the important files and things like that. You want to get rid of all backups, right? You don't want them to be able to restore their machine. You want them to pay you, and you want them to pay you and to not get their files back without you giving them the key, right? So with that, we decided that more than likely VSS admin delete shadow copies all is more than likely how they would go ahead and run that.
And again, this is just a simple example and a bit of a freebie here for some of the typical behaviors we expect to see, one, from ransomware actors in general, but two, specifically, this is how we've seen Blacksuit actually distributing their ransomware malware or variant and getting execution. When it comes to simple things like RDP, so many people are afraid to use RDP during a threat emulation or pen test, and they feel it's not a real procedure. It's not valid as a test. When in reality, that's what we've been seeing, and that's all that we're seeing consistently over and over again from almost every threat actor out there. They're taking advantage of the native Windows RDP client, or they're bringing in some other RMM tool or something like ConnectWise. So don't sleep on this and don't have this weird aversion to utilizing something as simple as RDP. The threats are doing it. Why shouldn't you? You know?
Yeah. Use the living off the land techniques, use what's available. That's what the adversary is using. We'll probably say it about 20 more times because it's just people just do not believe it. I don't know. Maybe when we do our own research here in a second, we'll see it and it'll make more sense to everybody. Tell your friends, right? All right. So we found the good stuff. We have our CTI, things like that. We need a way to ensure we document it in a format that is easily readable, that will have our procedures listed on there, that'll have our mappings, things like that. So with that, we have in our PTEF, which is the Purple Team Exercise Framework created by Scythe. We have a very straightforward way to accomplish that, right? We're just going to list out the tactic, technique, procedure, and reference of what we discovered. And then that'll kind of give us the beginnings, and we'll have the making of our threat emulation plan. In this part, also, we can knock out our tagging. By tagging, I mean MITRE TAC mapping to the tactics and techniques, which will more than likely we'll need later on down the road when we do some kind of report or something like that. So just a very straightforward, easy to understand way. It doesn't have to be super complicated. It could just be an Excel doc with these couple of columns on there to get you going. It's also fine if it is incomplete. So in the lab, which we're about to start on the next slide. In the lab, we have an example like a Kickstarter almost for Blacksuit Ransomware um, threat emulation plan. Some of those are blank, or the procedures might not be exact, like copy paste commands, because of those gaps we were talking about earlier. One of those, which again we'll see here in a minute, is that Blacksuit will utilize Sharphound to try to enumerate your Active Directory domain and trust and things like that, but it doesn't say exactly how they do it. So instead of having a procedure of like running Sharphound or running Bloodhound, we just kind of put in there what the CTI says, and when we get to the translating part, we'll worry about trying to fill in with those gaps. So it's okay if it's not an exact copy paste command yet. We will get to that. It's important just to document what you see, what the procedures are, and then document your CTI so you can refer back to it when you need to. Or if you're doing it in a collaborative group, others can refer back to it as well and see the same reporting that you're seeing. All right, and then with that, it is time for our first lab. So in this, the main goal of this lab is to develop a threat emulation plan, right? So in there, we're going to research Blacksuit ransomware threat actor. We will distill down some of the CTI into our procedures that we'll put on our threat emulation plan. And then at the end of it, we'll kind of discuss what everybody saw and see if we're all kind of seeing the same thing, maybe share what our threat emulation plans look like. Let me just pivot over to core stack real quick so everybody can see that.
Now, if you haven't already, check your email. I don't know if you popped in here after we had started. You would have gotten something from CoreStack giving you access to today's workshop. As you hop in here, Tyler's about to walk through and kind of show you what you should expect and some key things to pay attention to.
For sure. Oh, I see in the attendees, Jeffrey Rodriguez is here. What's up, man? Nice to see you. If I can count on anybody, I can count on Jeffrey Rodriguez to be on these. But over here in course deck, should have had the link. When you click on it, it should show up something kind of like this. Blacksuit Threat Emulation Workshop. We have in here a little core stack familiarization video that it was recorded by Trey to just kind of walk you through some of the nuances of core stack. That's the platform that we're running this on. We'll go through a Scythe familiarization. If you guys didn't know, you are in a Scythe workshop, and we're going to be using Scythe to perform our threat emulation here in a little bit. So it just kind of walks you through different core components of Scythe. These are the modules that we will be utilizing when we create our threat. You're going to want to keep this Scythe familiarization page kind of in your back pocket. It's going to be, I think, pretty useful when we get into the threat emulation piece. So it talks about the different modules, some examples of how to use them, descriptions, things like that. Then we'll get into creating our first campaign. This is just kind of a dummy campaign to get you familiar with the platform. We're going to use the logs generated in this in our hunting exercise later on. Please go through that, and then we'll get into the actual documenting of our behavior. So, excuse me. So then when we get into the documenting of our behaviors, that's when we'll actually start getting into Blacksuit itself. So we'll, talk a little bit about what a threat is. We have an overview or a threat profile on Blacksuit with just some information. We're going to start our threat outline. This is just an example of an emulation plan. This is not the emulation plan that we're going to be using. We talk about attack flows, then we'll get into the actual CTI collection itself. Down here, this is kind of our adversary emulation plan Kickstarter, basically. So we went ahead and looked through some of the CTI articles that we have listed here, like the CISA Blacksuit Ransomware Advisory and the DFIR report on Blacksuit, as well as having some other sources up here for you. But so we had gone through them to pull some out. We only have about 3 hours, so we're not going to more than likely not going to be doing anything super crazy. So wanted to have a little bit of a Kickstarter for you guys to fall back on. You can also download it and then drag and drop it into your Unicorn host instance to be able to open it in Excel on your workstation and update it as you need. Please put your own, please add to the threat emulation plan. Don't just leave it as it is. Please add to it so we can discuss different things that people see, what you think is important. Specifically, you want to look for execution techniques, persistence mechanisms, defense evasion, data exfil, and the impact. We don't need to be concerned with initial access for this part because we already have access to the machine. We don't need to worry about creating a phishing email or anything like that. We're more concerned with the actions on the host itself, right? And then, so we'll go ahead and do that. Document your findings, procedures, tactics, techniques, things like that. And then lastly, we'll get into the CTID attack flow, which is just a way to visualize what's happening here, right? So with that, I think the only other thing is your systems over here. You're going to want to click systems and launch the group. That way your machines can get turned on. Once they all turn on, you should see the Unicorn host will allow you to connect. It'll probably take a few minutes because it's got to, everything has to turn on and kind of start talking to each other. So it might take a few minutes, so please get that started now. And yeah, we're going to go from the start down to the CTID attack flow. What do we have on time for this? About 20 to 35 minutes. So we will check in about 20 minutes. That'll put us at 10 after and see where everyone's at. If we need a little more time, we'll do a little more time, and then we'll go over what we've seen. And
Now, and again, keep in mind that the main goal for this chunk of lab time is for you guys to go through that documenting our behaviors section. You're looking for those behaviors, as Tyler talked about. Utilize that spreadsheet. Do a bit of research. See if you can find some other links that detail some of Blacksuit's actions in the past that we didn't provide you. At the end of the time, we'll probably talk about it a bit, see if you guys found anything interesting, and then move on to taking this information that we've gathered and turning it into something we can use. As we're going through this, if you guys have any questions, comments, concerns, things like that, please drop them in the chat and let us know.
So the Scythe bookmark will be inside of the Unicorn host box. So once you are let me add this. Once you are in the manual, if you click on systems over here, the Unicorn host should populate once they're all turned on, and then click connect. It'll take you to the Unicorn host box. 1 second. And then from in that, you just want to open Chrome and the Scythe bookmark will be in there. And then just one other piece I wanted to show real quick. In the in the manual, when you guys get to it for the cyber threat intelligence collection piece, if you want to download this Excel sheet, you could just download it, and then if you drag and drop it onto your Guacamole instance on the Unicorn host box, it should transfer it over there. And then to get to it, you can just go to this PC Guacamole file system, and then that's where it should be. So you can utilize that if you need to copy anything up from your local host or any of the files that we are going to download in this course. Um, if you download them to your local host and need them on the Unicorn box, that's how you can access them. All right, just to check in to see how everybody is doing. We still have some more time to go ahead and do this, but just make sure everybody is going through it all right. Has everyone gotten through the Scythe first campaign at least?
Cool. Well, if you can, just to help us out so we can get a good gauge of where you guys are at. Once you get done with the documenting sections, please just throw a thumbs up down in chat so we know we're good to move on.
Yeah, Tim. So just keep going through to the end of Sorry, pulling the manual up. Uh, Go ahead. You're going to do all of the next section as well, the documenting our behaviors. Do it all the way down to the CTID attack flow. So we still have about 15 minutes left in this lab. Just wanted to check and see where everyone's at. Again, if you have any issues, please let us know as soon as they come up so we can try to alleviate them. I will extend the timer out to just do another 17-minute one because I think that was a little shorter. So yeah, we'll do about another 17 minutes or so, and then we'll just go over some of the main pieces, and then we'll move on. Again, if you have any problems, please let us know when they come up. right. Hey everybody, I'm gonna go ahead and go over some of the lab. Before we do that, does anyone have any questions that they would like to go over before we do that? All right. So if you're not done, you can keep on working. We just want to make sure that we stick to our timetables here. And then you guys should have an additional hour of the lab environment set up for after the workshop is over as well. So if you want to go back and update things or do some other things, you can feel free to do so at the end as well. So with that, I said kicks off just with the core stack familiarization. It's a pretty good self-explanatory platform, but there are some nuances in there, so we include this video. And then next up, like I said, is just some site familiarization. So in here, you guys all know how to read, so I won't go over everything in here, but some of the main pieces I wanted to point out is the virtual file system. So any files or executables or things like that, i.e. Sharphound, that you are going to want to execute later on, you can put that in the virtual file system, and that will allow you to download it from the virtual file system. It doesn't have to be stored on the internet or anything. It'll be able to be downloaded directly from the Scythe C2 platform. So yeah, any executables, binary scripts, ransomware notes, whatever you would like, you can put it in the virtual file system. And then on there, just some of the other modules. Some of the things to kind of point out here is that there are multiple ways to do things. There are some modules that do specific tasks, but it'll be up to your interpretation of it when we get down to the executing our plan, where we actually translate the threat emulation plan that we've created into a Scythe campaign that we will execute. So more on that to come. But again, I would just reference this Scythe familiarization page when we get to that. So then next up, we're going to build a threat. Did anyone run into any issues with this? If you did, please either unmute or you could put it in the chat. But in there, we're just going to go ahead and create a campaign, give it a name. You can leave the defaults in there. And then from in there, we loaded some of the modules. These modules are what we were talking about here with the Scythe familiarization part. So I think we wanted to load ARP, print screen, things like that. We can go down to execute an action. We can either do a custom action here, which will allow us to select our module and then type whatever it is. I should have clicked run because run has more options. ARP just does ARP. But me load run, or I'll do upshell. So in upshell, you can click and then type in the command that you want to run. So get tac local users, local user. It'll populate over there. Should have clicked show more, where it has some of the defaults in there for the modules itself. And then from in there as well, we have the adding attack techniques. So in this, I believe it was 1124 system time discovery. This is mapped to Atomic Red Team, as well as some custom atomic testing that we've developed at Scythe. So if you have a tactic or technique or something in particular you want to emulate, or you want to run the atomic test for it, just go ahead and type the T code up there in the top, or keyword search for it. Click that. We did system time discovery, hit configure. If they require additional inputs, you'll be prompted for it here, but we're good with just the default. We'll add the step. From there, it wanted you to save it. So you just click save, give it the name and description, and save the threat. And then you can create the campaign from there. Once you create your campaign, it should drop you down in this campaign view. You're going to hit that checkbox, download. This was a DLL. Going to want to change the DLL to DLL register server. This is just the entry point for this function. It will work with the absolute client main, but we just go ahead and change this, just show you that you're able to do that there. And then you're going to download it. We will open up that file, which I renamed. That's not going to pop up. We'll open up the file here, downloads. We're going to rename it to dar.dll. That's just so you guys can copy and paste directly from it. You don't have to actually rename it for it to execute. And then we'll open that command prompt in the same directory. We will run dll32.exe, call dar.dll, and then give it that entry point. So from there, you should receive a check-in. If you click this drop-down box, you can click Unicorn Host, which is our endpoint. And then here you can see the commands that are being ran as well as their output. So this again is just to kind of get you familiar with Scythe as we'll be using it to deploy our threat emulation plan here in the next section of labs. I think the last part I had you do in here is open up the shell to kill that campaign or terminate that campaign. So if you did that, great. If you didn't, you don't need to. I like to leave it open just so I can have the shell to interact. But from in there, you can run or you can perform the same commands you ran in the campaign builder just by typing, run who am I, whatever it is. It's the same syntax as inside of the campaign. The campaign creator, campaign view just allows you to be a little more interactive and hands-on. You don't have to automate it. You could just go ahead and put in whatever you would like to put in. Any questions on that? No? Okay. So then next up, what we're all here for is actually getting into Blacksuit itself. So let's talk about what makes a threat viable. You want to know their capability, opportunity, hostile intent. That's what actually makes a threat. Like Trey had said earlier, we're not going to get super into this part. This workshop's going to be a little more high level. We have additional workshops that cover all of these in great depth if you would like to attend those. When we get into, we're going to build our threat outline. So to kind of help again and just kickstart some of this, we have a threat profile on Blacksuit Ransomware. A lot of this is what we talked about in those first couple of slides, just again to give you a little bit more context and a precursor into Blacksuit Ransomware. Again, probably something that would be valuable to you is knowing that this is most likely a rebrand of the threat actor group known as Royal Ransomware. They seem to have shifted or rebranded. Maybe they got a new PR guy, who knows, pretty recently. So if you are looking for reporting, CTI reporting under Royal Ransomware would probably also be very helpful to you if they have not changed it to Blacksuit yet in some of the reports, or if you're looking at more historic reporting, right? Into some of the objectives, again, just trying to get as much money as possible. They don't really seem to care about what industry they're attacking. They just want as much money as they can get. Into some of the capabilities, and then we have a little bit of a rudimentary diamond model. This diamond model is typically used with CTI analysts to have a visual representation of what they see in the reporting. Some more advanced ones will link different pieces of these. This is just an example one that we have for this workshop. And then we have some references here. I saw when I clicked on them that a bunch of these are dead links. So they must have moved some of these around. Should have gone onto archive.org and pulled these down for you guys. I don't know when they would have updated these because this is a brand new workshop. But we have some more in the next page as well. So we'll get into that adversary emulation plan we talked about. This is just an example, and then attack flow, again, just an example. In the next part of the manual, we should have gone in, done some research on Blacksuit ransomware from these links that we've provided or additional links that you found on your own. That's totally fine. And added to this adversary emulation plan kind of as you saw fit. So I'll switch over to here. So I ended up just downloading it, dragging it up to my Unicorn box, and then we have LibreOffice on the Unicorn box, so you should have been able to open it there. So in there, some of them that I do just want to point out that might not be procedures, but is still valuable information is some of the C2 IP addresses and ports. I think that's important to have. We include in some of our emulations, we will generate network traffic that will attempt to connect to the C2 IP addresses or domain names without actually interacting with it. It's not good practice to go to an adversary's IP address like in your browser. You don't want to invite an adversary to dance with you. You want them to just kind of leave you alone. So it's not good to really interact with them by going to their site directly from your box. You want to use something like VirusTotal or URL Scanner, URL IO, things like that, domain tools to interact with it. Or if you're going to launch it from a victim box that's not a production box, you just want to perform actions on like a lab machine, then you can feel a little more comfortable doing that. But please do not go to like evil.com. That's not the best practice, right? Some of the other ones on here, you can see how we had talked about if the procedure isn't explicitly listed in this phase so far, that's okay. You just kind of provide some context into what it's doing and you can just copy paste pull it from the CTI. So in here we have the VSS admin to delete shadow copies. It doesn't say exactly how they do it. So we have that in there as well as sharphound. It says that it runs in default mode. There's a little bit of explanation into what sharphound is, and it says that it outputs to this DOGI directory. So that's something we can use later on. Kind of the same with Rubius and PSExec. Not exact commands, just kind of some pieces of it. We'll need to further research, synthesize some other reports, or use our better judgment to try to emulate these. And then the last one is this persistence mechanism of them using the SOX32.exe. In this, it doesn't say exactly what the SOX5 executable, it doesn't exactly say what it's doing. So it's going to be kind of up to us to decide if we want to make the SOX32.exe create a network connection, or if we just want to have a dummy file in there just to show, do we see this persistence mechanism taking place? And what I mean by that is, like, do we see modifications to our registry? Do we see an alert to our registry later on? So it all just kind of depends on what your end goal is with emulating a threat actor. But again, it's okay to just put kind of what you know now in there, and as you go on, you can then translate it into something a little more actionable. Did anyone have anything else that they added into their threat emulation plan? Anything that they saw in the DFIR report or the CISA reporting that you thought was valuable and should be indicated on there? We'll say a note before anyone says anything. We are not going to, when we get to the actual threat creation piece, we are not going to emulate all of these actions. We're not going to emulate all of these actions today because we simply just do not have time. This can take hours, days, depending on what you're trying to do. So even if you're like, I don't want to write this down because I don't want to be responsible for emulating this very, very complicated action, don't worry about that. We're not going to do that. We're going to keep it simple. And if you feel the need to do more advanced things, and that is totally fine. Yeah. So with that in mind, did anyone put anything else in their threat emulation plan, or have anything of interest that they saw in this reporting that they would like to include in an emulation plan? And feel free to put it in the chat or to unmute. Everyone should be able to unmute themselves.
I'd be curious to see if anybody found any new reporting or looked outside of the links we gave.
Yeah, I see what you're saying, Tim, with having more time. You can spend all day, researching this and adding to it. That's why we kind of included the Kickstarter, because we knew that it was, weren't going to have as much time to make a legitimate, threat emulation plan for a full emulation. Yeah. Say the one in here that I thought was very interesting, that we didn't include, is under the encryption. It says that the FBI found numerous bat files on the impacted systems, which had performed additional actions such as creating a new admin user, GP update, set some registry keys to auto extract, executed the ransomware, deleted some files and some logs and other things like that. Excuse me. I thought that was interesting. We didn't include the bat file creation in our threat emulation plan, and we have a Scythe Blacksuit emulation that we did not include the bat files in for how they perform some of these actions. So I thought that was really interesting, something I would maybe like to include in an update or something like that. There any other are there any other procedures that people saw? And by procedures, I mean like exact commands, such as this 7-zip command or system info, NTL test, things like that. Were there any other specific commands or procedures you saw that we could just copy and paste out and then just run them as is? Not see anything. That's all right. We'll just keep on going. The one that I did think was neat with this threat actor that we don't really see in a lot of other ones is they do utilize some outside tooling and scripts. And by utilize some of them, they utilize a lot more than a typical threat actor. Normally, they'll just download like one script or executable or something like that, and then that'll be enough because the more you download, the louder the noise is, the easier it is going to be for you to get caught. But Blacksuit does not seem to care, which is maybe indicative of some of the industries or the victims that they've been targeting, that they don't have a very sophisticated defensive stack. But that I mean, because they're running Sharp Hound, which is extremely loud. They're running AD Find, I think is on here, which essentially does the same thing, close to the same thing, but it's also extremely loud to like dig through all of your directory, like see all these artifacts that they're leaving behind. Like get data info.ps1, which is loud. I mean, really running a lot of stuff that makes a lot of noise that is almost overlapping with some of the other tools or procedures that they're running. So I thought that was very interesting. I don't know if that speaks to, again, the level of maturity of the group or the level of maturity of their victims, right? You can see here under this Windows utilities, we have a bunch of stuff, just copy and paste to do some pings. NetGroup admin, we could copy paste those out to just run explicitly in our campaign. See if there's any other ones. Not the lateral movement piece. 7-zip, which we've pulled out. That'll be interesting when we go to emulate that. Um, I'll see some DNS queries out to this domain, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah, lots of interesting stuff in here, and lots of, I don't know, some more complicated things in there too that you can emulate if you're a little more advanced. Um, so with that, we have our, excuse me, we have our adversary emulation plan Kickstarter, basically, that we have. Everyone should have access to this and download it if you need it. And then the next part of it was the creating of the attack flow. Attack flow is a very useful tool to visualize what you see in a campaign or in an emulation plan. It's great if you are kind of a visual person, visual learner. You could create an attack flow to map out what you want your threat emulation plan to do. It's also great for reporting purposes when you're done and have, you know, a pretty picture and it's all in there. It makes it a lot easier for people to read than just a wall of text that may or may not make sense to everybody. So in the attack flow, it's very simple to go ahead and get started on it. There are a lot of options, but to get started, you just right click, create attack flow action. You give the action a name, give the action a name, you put in the tactic and technique, you put a little description in of what this step is doing. And then under it, it has all of the sticks objects and sticks observables. Drawing a blank on what sticks stands for, but it's essentially a nomenclature for all of the artifacts you would see from an adversarial campaign, such as malware, hashes, command line, network connections. I don't know why I'm trying to name them off the top of my head. They're all just listed right here, but it's got a ton. So you can put any kind of artifacts you would see from an adversary campaign that you've observed into this. We'll mostly just focus on IP addresses and processes. That's really all that we need for our threat emulation plan. And then in here, if you notice, not all of them have processes underneath. That is fine. It's because we don't know what the process is yet. So we just put copy paste our description from our threat emulation plan here, our procedures here, such as the Sharp Hound one, and just paste it right into the too much, sorry. Just paste it right into the description, and then when we get to that part in the translating section that is up next, we can go ahead and translate these into our procedures and update our attack flow, right? Does that make sense to everybody? Is everybody able to get through all of that, or at least do most of these actions? Alrighty. Say, well, Trey, I think that's over to you. You are on mute if you're saying anything.
Yep, happens every call at least once, dude. Come on.
Got him. Ramses seems to have been taken over on most of your mute talks though, so that's been good.
It helps out a little bit. All right. Why did my window become giant all of a sudden? Didn't need that. Cool. Okay. So here we go. So we talked through CTI, some different elements where you can find these kind of documents, behaviors, procedures, all that kind of fun stuff, and gave you a few quick examples of how you can pull out usable pieces and parts and document it for yourself. Now we're going to talk through threat emulation, what it is, and how you can take this data you just collected and put it to use. Now, with that in mind, I got a quick little 101 slide. Like I said, this is an inch deep, mile wide. So what is threat emulation? To keep it simple, we're trying to be the threat. Too long didn't read. That's what we're trying to do, be the threat. But in reality, we're trying to simulate or emulate these real world effects that our threat actors are having against other organizations, whether that's in our market vertical or just in general in the community, and test our defenses to see how we can alert, detect, and respond to these different behaviors and procedures and tooling. We're really trying to kind of just understand, get into the mind of that attacker, figure out how they operate, see how we can utilize that to test ourselves and identify any weaknesses in our security posture. And then from there, a nice little kind of secondary effect that we get from this is being able to train our teams in detecting and responding to these attacks. A lot of organizations don't do this kind of a thing. They'll get their annual pen tests, stuff like that, but it's usually just somebody throwing spaghetti at the wall and seeing how many vulnerabilities they can turn up. They're not actually responding to these events as a SOC or doing any kind of actual incident response as a part of it. So with threat emulation and tying this together with purple team engagements like we do here at Scythe, this allows us to actually give these teams a chance to see how their tools work, how long it takes for logs to populate or alerts to happen, see how their team responds, check, see like how their documentation is set up, if they've got the correct procedures in place, maybe they need to make some tooling changes. That's really what we're trying to accomplish here with threat emulation. So there's a lot going on, but it's a very effective use of time that we've found. So let's talk about the key piece here, emulating capabilities of our adversaries. That CTI, that's step one, right? We need that to be able to replicate those real world procedures. We want to base our emulations in fact. We don't want it to always be or we don't want it to be something that we just kind of cook up that we think sounds cool. Every now and then you can do that. I love to do that. I'll come up with different threats. Be like, yeah, it'd be really interesting to see how this would look in a kill chain or to see how a team would respond to it. And we'll make something unique. But for the sake of training our teams and testing our defenses, we want to make sure we're keeping our threats based in fact, things we've seen in intelligence, known documented behaviors. For the pieces that are missing, like we said earlier today, we're not always going to have a full kill chain. That data might be lost, wasn't documented, the threat deleted logs, things like that. So sometimes we're going to have to fill in the gaps in those details, and this can be done several different ways. One is we tend to look at other reporting from that same threat actor or similar threat actors, see if we can find a common procedure or behavior that matches and we think would fit into the engagement. We might look at someone from a similar vertical, maybe a different style of threat actor doing the same kind of behavior. Or sometimes we just kind of make a choice between us and be like, okay, there's just nothing here for lateral movement. How do we want to do it? And we can show it any number of different ways. When in doubt, go back and reference MITRE ATT&CK. It documents all kinds of different ways that you can do behaviors from initial execution all the way down to data collection, exfil, and impacts and objectives. So sometimes we'll do that. We'll fill the gap in. And then lastly here, when we think about emulating our adversary and their capabilities, emulation is not always going to be an exact replication. We want to focus on being practical and being accurate, but not necessarily perfection. And we're not always going to be able to reach perfection, right? Because we're not a nation state actor. We're not funded the same way these guys are. We have day jobs. We're doing other roles, responsibilities, and tasks. We don't have all the time in the world to craft some really cool custom ransomware payload or something like that, right? So getting something that emulates that behavior or that would trigger those same mechanisms is good enough. We don't need to utilize their payload. That's not a good test, right? Can you detect the hash? Cool. But then you also just introduced malware to your environment. So just keep that in mind. You don't have to always be perfect. You just want to be good enough to test. And we're really, again, prioritizing that detection and response of your team and tooling that they're able to learn. And overall, you as an organization improve your security posture. Now let's talk about different kind of capabilities we could utilize during threat emulation. As you were looking through your CTI, you saw that Blacksuit uses quite a few different tools, right? They do a lot of living off the land, so we saw them using things like net commands, MSTSC for remote desktop, system info, just a ton of different little local living off the land stuff. That's a relatively simple and low barrier to entry when it comes to threat emulation. It's great that they use all of those different things because that makes it really easy for us to emulate the threat, right? But as you start kind of climbing up that ladder a bit and they're getting into using outside tooling like AD or Impacket or SharpHound, where now it takes you as an operator understanding those tools and how to utilize them to be able to use it in an emulation. So with all of this in mind, try to start simple. Emulate the stuff you're seeing that you could easily say, do the copy and paste, or kind of pull out of that intelligence how they are doing a specific behavior and run it yourself in a non-sophisticated manner. And grow as a threat emulation specialist or as a red teamer, whatever you happen to be doing in your role over time to meet your organizational's needs and complexity. Odds are, if they're not catching the small stuff, they're not seeing net use or local user creation or the use of who am I in system info, they're not going to catch you running all of the more sophisticated tooling and doing things in memory and stuff like that. So don't come right out the gate swinging for the fences and trying to be a crazy APT overnight. Here on the slides, we just got a couple examples for you guys of what we're talking about from like developing capabilities. The bottom right you're seeing there, it's a bunch of pretty simple stuff from recon and impact commands, right? We're just using all local living off the land stuff, WMIC, ARP, fsutil, adding registry keys. It's nothing crazy or sophisticated. And then again, up at the top there, we're doing nothing super crazy, right? Just binding a socket over quad fours. This is as objectively complex as you need to get starting out in threat emulation. You don't need to be crazy. Okay. So next. Cool. This is where, again, you're at one of our workshops, so we're talking about Scythe as well as we do this whole process. This is kind of where we come into play, right? Not everyone can afford to have an on-hand red team. Not everyone can afford to do this stuff consistently on their own. So we as an organization have built out our tooling, our platform to allow you to be the threat without having to understand all of the complexities and tools and craziness that they're using. We make it very transparent for you and how we build out these threat campaigns and allowing you to run it yourselves, but we don't require you to be this super advanced red teamer. Just have to throw that out there. We've got a ton of pre-existing threat and threat campaigns that you can utilize to emulate and get started down this journey. We have a bunch of built-in modules like you've seen in the Kickstarter and as you go through this next section that you can utilize to emulate specific tooling or behaviors. Like let's say you wanted to do in-memory execution or utilize unmanaged PowerShell. We have modules for that. Maybe you want to do some process howling but don't know how. We have a module that'll do it for you. You follow the knowledge base articles and the help functions and the commands, and it'll get you on your way to utilizing those kind of capabilities and kind of level up to the next tier of how you operate without a ton of sunk time and cost into training and research and development. Lastly, the ability to automate and schedule campaigns and run these things at will is such a huge benefit for teams. We allow both our payloads to execute from a true threat perspective, like download implants, run them that way, or through an agent, if you prefer to do these in a more scheduled manner and controlled. So you have a lot of flexibility in the platform and how we utilize it, and you guys are going to get to see that and play with it a bit as we go. Let's see, got a question here. A Tarpeter? Yep, Tyler's right. So Tim, question said, do you guys do any correlation to SIEM EDR, etc. logs that say if the actions are logged, detected, prevented, etc.? So yes, within the Scythe platform, we don't have them set up in this lab environment, but in a normal environment, RS Assets, things like that. We do have integrations with all of the major SIEMs, EDRs, security tooling, ticketing systems that allow you to do those correlations between you running something, doing a behavior in Scythe, and then actually determining if it was logged, alerted, detected, all of that fun stuff. So right with that, the sky's the limit with the way we do integrations. Doesn't matter if you're with CrowdStrike, Microsoft Sentinel-1, you're using some weird AV. The way we do the integrations, it's a quick, simple hook in. And if it's kind of like a hard one for you to do, or it's a unique case, our team's here to help actually set those integrations up as well. Did that answer your question, Tim? Cool. So yeah, that's just a quick talk on Scythe. Through this next section of the labs, we're going to utilize Scythe primarily to take the behaviors in CTI we collected and try to emulate them. So you're going to be running through this lab and actually doing the piece. And with that, look at that lab slide. Awesome. So our goal in this lab is to emulate these threat behaviors based on our threat plan that we kind of collected in that Excel spreadsheet earlier. Your main task, you're going to hop into Scythe, build out a custom threat campaign, and then execute it. You can stage some binaries in the VFS if you would like to do that, kind of mimicking the way the threat actor pulls files in and out, and then deploy the threat. We're going to give probably about a half hour, 45 minutes for this one, depending on you guys. As you complete it, throw us a hands up in chat or just let us know. If you guys finish faster, we can move on to the detection side. We want to make sure you guys see everything. But what I want to do real quick, just so you guys see it from us before we start a timer. Let's see, in my playthrough here, let me connect to Unicorn host. Sure, got the right creds. Do 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 do. Guacamole's taking its time. So I'll just open up Scythe real quick. Sign in. Now what I'm going to do, I'm going to skip through these two top sections. You guys can look at these. They just kind of walk you through setting up a campaign again. I was going to show you a quick example of setting up a campaign that you can run and execute utilizing some of these known behaviors from Blacksuit. I'm going to show system info, then you guys can follow on afterwards in the lab and do the Sharphound and ransomware piece yourself and any other behaviors you want to run through. So now that I'm in Scythe, our dashboards aren't populating because I've got nothing that's ran in the last 15 minutes, so don't let that scare you. Go to campaigns. I'm going to create a new one. Call it sysinfo test. I'm going to do a quick customization. So I'm running through the campaign builder piece. What I'm doing right now is defining our C2 and how that's going to look. I want to utilize HTTPS as our C2 channel. Our platform can target Windows, Mac OS, and Linux with implants or with an agent, depending on how you want to operate and how your organization is set up. We also support a bunch of different communications modules for C2, primarily HTTP and S, DNS, SMB for like lateral movement pieces, and steganography. There's also a bunch of guardrails and customization you can do. So like putting boundaries on when and how implants can execute, what devices or domains they execute on. Let's see. Yep. Thanks. Do you have any support for Kubernetes? Do you mean like our implants running directly in Kubernetes, Tim? We don't have a native one built for it, but we do have some threats that are targeting containers and how they operate and do different things. The same goes for cloud. So AWS, Azure, GCP, we can target all of the big three, you know. We've got previously built campaigns already staged for you, as well as modules to help with their interaction. But I'm going to leave a lot of this kind of default for now because we don't need guardrails. We're in a lab. I'm just going to change my heartbeat from the default to, let's say, 3 seconds, make it a little faster. Hit next. Now I've got several different ways I can go about this to replicate running system info on my endpoint. First thing we need to do anything is load some modules. So I'm going to load, I believe we have an actual just system info module, right? Yeah. So I'll load that one. I'm going to load run and I'm going to load upshell just so you guys see it from a couple different ways. The next thing to do is can do a custom action. We'll start with system info. If I just hit this, it's a super simple module. All it's going to do is query the host for its system information and give you a response back. So we'll do sysinfo and hit add action. So that step's there. Create a new one under run. So we're going to do run, let's say main/c. Um, or,
System info.
yep, I was like, I'm getting caught up looking at the module name.
Say, Trey, someone put a lot of time into making the manual. It's all written out in there.
Yeah, it is, but I'm trying not to copy and paste.
I'm just kidding.
Yeah, I got you. Run Command C, system info. So there's our one for run. And then we'll do it one more time in up shell. So up shell, you go dash dash command system info. Now, what I'm saying here, like with up shell specifically, I'm telling it to utilize or execute this command as a PowerShell command line. Now, up shell is different from run. So if you guys are familiar with any of the other common C2 frameworks, like say Empire and Star Killer or Cobalt Strike, things like that, run is more traditionally like your shell environment or getting a normal session. It starts in command prompt by default. If you want it to execute in PowerShell, you have to call PowerShell then whatever you want it to do. It's a little noisy, a little loud. It's a very default capability. Upshell is utilizing unmanaged PowerShell. So it's calling that system management automation DLL on your victim endpoint. So it's loading all of those features and functionalities of PowerShell without ever actually calling PowerShell on the end host. So it's a little stealthier, sneaky way to execute commands or actions on an endpoint. So I've got a quick 3 actions. If I wanted to add more, I can kind of keep going. I can reorder these, but I'm just going to stick with these 3 for now so you guys can see a campaign run if you didn't do it already in the previous section. Hit create campaign. So now I've got my quick sysinfo test. With payload downloads, you've got a couple different ways. First one, click the little checkbox, come to the download button, and you can choose your payload type. Tyler demoed this earlier. The other route you have is clicking the 3 little dots, and under here you see direct download links. These will give you a precompiled binary or implant, whatever you want to call it, based on the format you want. Just for the sake of time and expedience, I'm just going to pick the 64-bit executable, hit done, open up my browser real fast, paste and go. So now I've got a new file in my downloads folder. Service login. I'm going to rename this real fast. And then I'm going to run it. So good question, Tim. So his question there is, do those payloads work on any host or does it have to have a scythe service running on that target host? So we have built these out to where you do not have to run some kind of service or agent or anything like that. You can run implants like you would traditionally do in a red team engagement or a pen test. We've had really good luck with some of the bigger named EDRs, like CrowdStrike. Our DLL implant typically will fly under the radar. Executables, like most AV EDRs, they get flagged just for the sake of being an executable that wasn't native to the endpoint. So you might have to work with that one a bit. You can also download some shellcode, pack it, load it however you want to, and execute it on the endpoint. But if you didn't want to go that route and show that, yes, you can in fact detect these specific types of payloads or implants, you can use an agent, have it scheduled out, and just push through the agent and run that way. We've got companies that like to use both in tandem. They'll do scheduled checks like automated tasks and like hygiene health checks and stuff through the agent. But as they're testing their teams and running engagements, they'll utilize the implants like I just did to execute on endpoint. So we see we got a callback. It ran through some steps. Let's take a quick look. I'm going to expand these all. So all of our loaders worked. Nothing wrong there. This first one from run, it ran. You can see the output back inside the campaign screen here. Same thing for what we called through upshell. Very similar output because I did the same behavior 3 different ways. Then lastly, you can see utilizing the sysinfo module pre-built into Scythe. That's there as well. Now, with that, you guys saw me kind of take one of these behaviors or procedures that Blacksuit typically utilizes, built it into a campaign real fast, and then executed it. Did you guys have any questions? Feel free to throw it in chat or come off mute as well if you want to. Okay, if not, we'll let you guys get to it then. So just as a reminder for this section, you're going to run through, create a custom threat, deploy the implant however you feel is best, and include some of those behaviors and procedures that you guys found in your CTI. Try and have a little bit of fun with this. Do something different, play around with Scythe, and get used to how it works. For this segment of time, for the next, say, half hour, 45 minutes, we'll run through from executing our plan start all the way to the end of running a custom campaign. And again, you can do all of this from that unicorn host. You don't need to tuck or access any of the others for the moment. If you guys have any questions, concerns, please let us know as you're going. Say it's about 5 till, so we'll go until around 3:15, 3:20. We'll check in with you guys. So don't mind me, I'm just going to be a little guy bugging you in your ear while you guys are working. Just a few questions. This is a first time we've ran a variant of a workshop like this. What do you guys think of the format so far? The platform good? Any issues with content, the way it's been set up so far? Anything that pops out to you guys? Yeah, that's understandable, Tim. It is a delicate balance of content to time and how we can run these, especially during a normal workday. We get other people have a lot of stuff going on throughout their day. So we try to give you as much content as possible. but also make it still realistic for you to complete it in the time frame. That is also why we push an extra hour after the workshop is over for you to continue playing in the lab environment if you wanted to. But I think that's good feedback. Maybe this is something, if we run with these further, we might want to extend time a bit. I just realized Red Canary's 2025 threat detection report webinar is going the same time we are today too. Had to check that out afterwards. Be interesting. Yeah, thanks for the time, Tim. Glad you were able to show up and participate. It should be good for another hour after your 3 p.m. call, so feel free to continue playing and going along in the lab. Hope to see you in the next one. Uh, Jeff. So what threats do we expect to be on the rise for the year? Are you thinking from like a behavioral perspective, a type of threat, or like specific actors? So that's kind of a pretty interesting question. I've been seeing a lot more and more lately. Then again, this is a personal opinion, not an opinion of Scythe or Tyler or Ramses or anybody else around me. But I think we're going to see a lot more actually bleeding into like what you said, like info stealers and then destruction. There's been a lot of ransomware in the last few years. A lot of them gotten pretty complex and complicated. But there's been a lot of rumblings and grumblings of some of these threat actors kind of skipping that whole process and just going right to disruption, especially when they're looking at stuff that's like, say, supporting infrastructure or state-sponsored organizations that they're targeting. They're looking more to disrupt or degrade the ability for these organizations to operate as opposed to just getting their money. So I think we might see more of that on the rise. Um, I think we're going to see, and we've said it like 10 times in this, and I think we'll see it, or we'll say it probably 10 more times in the next hour. I think we're going to see a lot more living off the land in unique ways of doing things. We're implementing a lot of new bits and baubles and toys into our environments, especially when it comes to large language models and AI and things like that. I could see threats over the next year or two starting to take advantage of those being in the environment and kind of using them as an execution method or a way to do their data discovery and collection as opposed to manually doing it themselves. What do you think, Tyler?
What do I think? In this recorded video, what do I think? No, I don't know. My focus always seems to be on like nation state effects, and I think probably coming from a military background and like actively threat hunting some of these groups, I always kind of go to that. I think groups like all the typhoons and the telecoms and OT environments, I think that we're going to see an even larger rise in attacks on them over the next year. Um, yeah, I don't want to say anything super political on here, but I think, yeah, with our current state of affairs in the world and national tensions, I think there's going to be a lot more disruption of nation activity. Is what I think. What do you think, Jeffrey and Lisa and Ramses? If you care to throw any out.
Scared Ramses away. Oh, there he is.
No, I was just going to say, my opinion is probably similar to Tyler's, with the progression of technology getting newer and things getting spicier in the political realm. Just going to see more of that sort of thing.
You know, so I definitely think Jeffrey has a piece on the two of the AI
Yep,
powered
AI for
info
sure. Yeah.
stealers. I think it's obviously the buzzword for now, but I think once they really figure out how to harness that, we see a lot of like AI powered like phishing and vishing and all that stuff to kind of get the initial access. But I think once they weaponize it even further to like, I think that AI is going to be used to kind of see what happened previously in a campaign, like thinking of it in like an automated campaign, such as like Insight seeing what happens beforehand, and then based off of that activity, maybe what it can do afterwards. Yeah, I definitely am curious to see how AI is going to be used in future attacks and how we would even know it's AI. I think that'll be interesting too. It should be, yeah, I think it's going to be very, very interesting.
Yep. As AI gets more polished, it comes off as more human as well. So,
Yeah, Trey hits on another good point that he brings up in probably most workshops is that CTI, it's it's pricey to get that paid for stuff. I mean, like you said, it's almost like a shame that it's a commodity because people need it, but it costs time and money to develop it and everything like that. So I totally understand why it is, but yeah, having the most up-to-date CTI thing is probably going to be very valuable. The quicker everything seems to happen and the quicker changes seem to occur.
I would say before most organizations have to really start thinking about CTI or like having like an FTE there to do that kind of a thing, even if it's like part-time or a secondary thing through your MSSP. You've got to think about yourself first. What do you have as an organization? Do you understand the hardware and software you're using in your environment? Is it all documented? Do you have asset lists? Like all of the simple building block foundational things that are not sexy to say are the things people really need to be focusing on. Because if you understand the hardware, the tools, the software, the way your users behave, it'll be that much easier to spot the bad, regardless of what fresh CTI and IOCs are out there. You'll be able to see an anomaly in your environment that much faster. And honestly, it'll do you better than any part-time or full-time CTI analyst is ever going to do.
Yeah, no, I totally agree on that. I think that it too, like you said, people want the sexy thing. It's like you buy the new tool, you put it in, but if you don't see what logs you have or even make sure that you're ingesting these logs or the alerts are going to who they need to, it's kind of doesn't really provide any value. You'll get more value, like you said, establishing a good baseline, knowing what's normal, so that way abnormal things will will stick out.
So, Jeffrey, a great example there of like how do you know what kind of CTI sources are legitimate and accurate? I would say the first and most important CTI resource you have is yourself. You as an organization, what threats have you faced in the past? Have you been breached already? Have you noticed any intrusions or crazy phishing or anything like that? All of that information can be consolidated and utilized to build that threat picture for you of who's potentially targeting you, why, where it's coming from, all of that fun stuff. But also think about all of the security tooling and vendors you're already giving money to. What logs are they generating? What kind of resources do they have for you already? If you pay for CrowdStrike or S1 or Microsoft Defender for Endpoint, they all have their own flavor of IOCs and a CTI platform built into their products. Are you utilizing that effectively before you start reaching out into the World Wide Web? And then what all are you shipping to your scene? Is your scene doing any kind of enrichment? Do you have any dashboards or alerts or anything like that set and triage that can give you some good hints and information as opposed to hunting on what ifs or, well, we saw this in this last campaign, so maybe they're doing it here. But think about what you have internal first. But I guess to actually answer that question though, outside of yourself, how to determine if something is legitimate or accurate, the easiest way to say is the internet's its biggest critic. Everyone we mentioned earlier in the CTI section are going to be great and all legitimate resources that are going to give out valid information. There's a lot of money at stake for them publishing, so they're not going to put out something false. I would say that's partly behind some of the delay in CTI being quick and timely, minus, the investigations and incident response and legal proceedings and everything else. But that's part of it. So anyone that's publishing like that, that's got a big name in the security field is going to do their due diligence first. The other thing to think about there is if someone's trusting it, if you're seeing it pop up in those kind of feeds like that, there's probably some form of credibility, but it's always a trust but validate thing, like everything is in security. Um, I'll never just believe one single source. It might be a high probability that it's true, especially if it's coming from someone like Microsoft or CrowdStrike or Darktrace, like Unit 42. All of these groups have known well reputations. Odds of them putting out false data is low. But I'm still going to look to see if I can correlate that same observation somewhere else. So just keep those checks and balances in place. So, Lisa, in addition to JR's comment, is there a document which can help technologists communicate business value to senior leadership? So, are you asking about like business value of CTI or having a CTI role, something like that? Is that where you're kind of going here? Okay. Yeah, I think Rams has kind of hit it on the head there. That's the million-dollar question. It's very hard to translate tech speak into business speak and why you need it. I would say the biggest example and the best document you could ever have is, have you been breached before? What was the previous impact? What did that cost you in time, money, remediation, and headache? That's the best thing you could utilize to communicate the need for this kind of intelligence or this kind of operation and how it can directly affect the impact on you as an organization. If you had that information, could you have potentially detected the threat sooner and stopped the impact before it got there? Or maybe the campaign only got partway through and you kicked out the threat before they were able to actually ransomware your organization. Those are the kind of questions you would ask. So as you're trying to communicate to business leadership that don't speak cyber, you want to always craft it into that perspective. They care about time, money, and manpower. So if you could explain to them how this new vulnerability in some piece of, say, very specific and critical software or hardware you use can translate into impact to the business if it's taken advantage of, that's where you'll get your win. Did that make sense? Did that help, Lisa? Awesome. Said Tyler will be right back. His headphones are freaking out. You guys doing okay with the labs? Need anything so far in the threat emulation piece?
Oh, good, it didn't end the whole thing. Sorry, my headphones were freaking out. I was like, let me close out and hop back in. Hopefully it doesn't kick everyone off.
Any other questions, comments, concerns from you guys? If not, we'll leave you alone for a bit and let you go through the lab. No, all right. Well, just let us know if you guys run into any roadblocks. Okay. So we're coming up on 3:20 Eastern. You guys need more time to go through this section of the lab, or do you want to move or keep pressing on?
I think it might be good to just walk through the Blacksuit piece of it. I have it in Scythe, and just kind of show how that looks, and then we can wrap up the detection piece, and then we'll have as much time back. We should hopefully the detection piece won't take too long, just so that way we can get through all the slides and stuff.
Cool.
If
Yeah,
that sounds good to everybody.
so it works for me.
Ready.
Let's
One
do the
second.
thing.
Yeah, I definitely think we're gonna, if we do this one again or another version of this, have to set it to 4 hours of ice, 3 hours.
It didn't feel like a ton of content when we built it, though.
Didn't feel like, yeah, you never know until you do it. All right. Get my screen set back up. All righty. So, here we go. So in here, Trey had walked through how to do, sorry, screen was all messed up. Here we go. Trey had walked through how to do the system info piece of it, and the point of that is to show that there's multiple different ways to accomplish it. So the same with Sharphound, or similar in Sharphound, there's multiple different ways to execute it. So here we have the technique, procedure, CTI reference. This is pulled from our threat emulation plan that we created. And then the procedure here again is still in more of a like description kind of way than in an actual way to execute it. So we have up here kind of what my assumption is of how they ran it. Not my assumption, our assumption of how that the adversary would run it. So running Sharphound in stealth mode, because that is typical for threat actors to do. Maybe they didn't run it in stealth mode because they also ran that AD find and everything else, so you could run it without it if you would like. And then the output directory of that DOGI, it being in the temp, I think was pulled from an additional source here. Sorry, yeah. So it didn't say in the Blacksuit ransomware where they put DOGI, where they put that folder, but it does have the temp directory here of a location where malicious files have been found. So we thought it would be fair to assume that we could utilize that as our staging directory, right? So just kind of synthesizing the multiple reports.
And this is
And
one
then,
we've seen quite a bit actually there, Tyler. I just want to touch on that for a second. We
yeah,
see app data used a ton. We see the temp directory used a ton. I'm trying to think of where else we've seen common things placed. We oddly enough, we've seen some people putting stuff in the root of C, but
yep.
I'd say like the most prevalent would be temp or app data.
Yeah,
They're pretty
temp,
cross-second.
app data, roaming app data, and public, I think is probably the most common, but but public and temp, a lot of people really look at that. So like app data or things like that, it's a little more sneaky, or like you said, just in the root of C, a lot of people have permissions to write to that. But it's in there, so that's what we know. So we put in what we know, what we think here with the temp, and then the stealth, because that's just what a lot of adversaries do. So anyway, so this is the procedure that we're going to emulate. But before we can emulate Sharphound, there's some things we have to do, some prerequisites that we might have to stage or download or kind of set up. So we need to make sure that the files are staged, those directories are created. We need to choose how we're going to execute actual sharphound.exe via either run or upshell. And then we need to be able to view those results so we can see what's going on. So some prereqs, like we said, we need to stage Sharphound so we can execute it. To do that, you can go to that Sharphound link, which is right here. We're going to download the zip file. We're going to, once we download it, it'll be in our downloads. Extract those files inside of this archive, which I'm not sure why it says WinRAR, but right click 7-zip extract here. These will come up. So we have a PS1 script, a PDB file, a config file, and then sharphound.exe. We're going to go back into Scythe, into our virtual file system. Going to go to threats. I'm going to create a new folder. Going to call it Blacksuit, or really call it whatever you would like. We're going to call it Blacksuit, all lowercase, the case matters. So all lowercase is what I would stick to. And then we're just going to upload, just click upload. upload our file of sharphound.exe. So now it's located on the file system. We'll be able to utilize it later on in our threat. Okay, so we got that part done. So we have that prereq done. And then we can, excuse me, we can switch over to now downloading Sharphound. So we're going to download Sharphound here, which I'll show what it looks like in Scythe here in a second. And then we're going to also stage that DOGI directory because it can't write to that directory if that directory doesn't already exist, right? So my favorite way to do that is with upshell, and you just use this if statement that's going to look if this directory exists. If it does not exist, perform this action. So it's going to test the path, which is checking if it exists. And if it doesn't, it's going to create that directory. Awesome. So let's see what that looks like in Scythe. So in Scythe, I already made and ran the campaign, but I'll show it this way in this campaign view. So I loaded a bunch of the modules in there just ahead of time. I like the modules to be at the top. And then next step, downloader, we're going to download, like I said, the source, VFS shared threats, Blacksuit, sharphound.exe. Destination is going to go to the temp directory, just like we saw in the manual a second ago. And then next up, we're going to create that directory just like we said. And you can see inside of campaigns, click the drop down here, scroll down to that, downloader, and upshell. So we can see it was downloaded, exit status 0 means successful. And then creating that directory, we can see that that directory was made here, right? Go back to manual. And then from here, we need to decide if we're going to execute this via upshell or via run. We have the commands for both there. Again, upshell, it's unmanaged PowerShell, so the logging is going to be a little bit different. I think for this, I just did run. Let me look. Yeah, so I ran run. We're going to do PowerShell-C. So that's going to tell our shell to launch PowerShell and run this command. Going to have the ampersand, so that way it doesn't tie up our terminal. It's going to allow it to run in the background. It essentially starts it as a job. And we're going to run sharphound.exe in stealth mode with this output directory. We could see it started to work. It was gathering the information. And we have this critical error down here because it says unable to get current domain. That is because this machine logs you in automatically as a local user. We did not put in the instructions to log in as somebody else. So we will fix that in future ones. But for the sake of this exercise and workshop, it really doesn't matter. This is still going to be logged, and we're still performing this adversary action, just like, back up. The adversaries also make mistakes and run things that don't work. The more you read CTI, the more that you can observe that adversaries will often make mistakes, just like I'm saying. So it is just as likely for them to run this thinking that they are, because our machine is domain joined, but our user is a local user. So it doesn't have access to query the domain controller or do anything like that. It's just as likely that it would happen to us, it would happen to an adversary. So just because you might run into some things that don't work or that might fail for whatever reason, it's okay. You can go in, do some more troubleshooting and things like that later on, but this log entry will still exist whether or not the command works. So then we run it via run or upshell. It's supposed to output its findings, which are like 4 different folders. I think it's like a computers.txt, users.txt, and some other ones that just give you all of the information that it gathered. It should output it in this DOGI directory. So to get that back, what we're going to do is compress the archive. So everything inside of temp DOGI, we're going to put it in a zip file inside the temp directory and then upload it up to Scythe. So back on the host, this is what it looks like. That's us trying to compress everything inside of this directory to this folder. You can see here that the directory is created, but it's blank because it couldn't connect to the domain controller because of the user, like I said. And then inside of uploader, we're going to upload that dogi.zip file up to us. And And then what we would do is click these three dots, click download, and then we would be able to view the file. But because there's nothing inside of the DOGI directory, there was nothing archived, there was nothing uploaded, but that's how it would look. And again, even if there are things that don't work exactly as intended, it's all right. You know, if we had all day to do this, we could go back in and make users and move them around and things like that to go ahead and have some entries in there. But these logs are still going to exist, which is really the point of doing adversary emulation, is to see, can you see what they are doing in your environment, right? So are there any questions on that?
So two things there, Tyler. The first one, if you guys wanted to go through and try that with Sharphound and do it again differently, the -D could allow you to specify the domain you want to query, or -domain controller would allow you to actually tell it who specifically to talk to with Sharphound. You don't have to do it, but that's there. But he made a great point. This is a great example of how you can make mistakes and how threat actors do the same. They're notorious for it. We've seen it in reporting specifically. I can think of two threat actors off the top of my head. The first one being APT41. Their click-through playbook has several spelling and grammatical errors in it that has been historically seen, where their people are putting those into the command prompt, just copy pasting and doing it wrong. The other one was in a lot of the reporting for Volt Typhoon. They were seen to go active hands on keyboard, and they were making mistakes with typing out like Wimic. They do like Wimnick and things like that instead. So they were actively in the environment on infected host making mistakes on keyboard. So that if you slip up or you do something like that in your threat emulation, whether you meant to do it or not, that's still a good thing. Because now you're not only testing, can your defenses and your tooling spot bad when everything is done perfectly, but what happens if they mess up? Can you notice that too? Can you see a difference in the way things happen? Maybe it'll stand out to you if someone types net users as opposed to net user. Those little bitty things could be a big tip off to an overall incident or problem, right? So just something to think about there. Yeah, Tyler's got a good example here too in this one.
Say, and then just like you were saying that adversaries make mistakes, this is an example that we have right here. This was pulled directly from the CTI. This is the exact command that the adversaries ran. If you run this, it does not work. This is the 7-zip portable 7-zip portable executable or standalone executable. When we did our Blacksuit emulation a few months ago, we tried to run this. This command has syntax errors in it and will not work as it was presented in the CTI. So again, some of the hurdles you face with CTI is it's just what they observe, and it is what it is essentially. But just kind of having the wherewithal to then go back, test it, continue on, and try to either figure out a way to get it to work, or you just leave the broken way in there and see if you can detect that. It's all kind of based off what you're trying to accomplish, right? And
It goes
then,
back to perfection versus realistic. So we're
yeah,
not trying to be perfect.
yeah. What's the saying that perfection is it's something that it's like perfection is the enemy of doing it. It's like if you're waiting for it to be perfect, it's never going to be done, right? I don't remember what the quote is, but it's something like that. And then we're not going to emulate this part. You guys can do that. I just want to kind of talk through it. For the actual ransomware piece itself, again, there are multiple different ways to do it. You can do it with the crypt module. You can do it with run. You can do it with upshell. You could create an executable, which you can then put inside of the virtual file system, download the executable and run it, and that executable will go in and encrypt the file system, things like that. It's however you want to do it, or however you see the adversary do it, as close as you can map it to them. So the same with the ransomware execution, there are prerequisites. The first of it, we are not trying to actually encrypt our file system because we need this lab machine to do other stuff. Maybe when you're all done with the lab, you can run a full encryption of everything, and that's fine because it's a lab environment. But generally speaking, we just encrypting one directory is probably fine, right? So we're going to create this desktop Blacksuit directory, and then next we're going to load the file module. The file module is something that we use to put dummy files or fake files, not fake files because they're real, but put put dummy files, staged files in that directory. So we're going to put 30 files in that directory. That just gives us something to encrypt, right? Next up, Blacksuit Ransomware utilizes double encryption ransomware. So what that means is they're going to send off your files unencrypted to themselves, and then they're going to encrypt your file system. The reason for that is that one, they'll get you on, if you want your files to be decrypted, you have to pay them, pay them a fee. You shouldn't pay them, by the way, but you have to pay them a fee. Then they will give you a key, which you can then encrypt your files with. So that's one. Two is now they have your unencrypted files out there in the wild. So they will, excuse me, sorry, goodness. So they will threaten you with releasing those files out to the world. So they get you to decrypt your files as well as threaten you with, if you want these to be private, you need to pay me again. So that's double extortion ransomware. We see this very, very commonly now. So in there, so we're going to compress our files and we're going to upload them up to Scythe, which so then we can emulate double encryption or double extortion ransomware. Next up is the actual file encryption, right? So the first way is with Crypt. Crypt is a module that will utilize the Crypt Windows API to encrypt the files on your endpoint. We're going to point it at Blacksuit, going to give it a password, or we're going to give it that file extension of royal_w, because that's what we saw in our CTI. The next way that you could do it is you could create that qwe.exe executable that the adversary used to then encrypt the file system. If you have, a malware dev or you're very competent in scripting and you want to do it that way, that's something that you can do. You just load that up in the virtual file system, download it, and then execute it. I will say, I think the easiest language to write in is PowerShell in PS1 scripts. So if you also are a fan of that, you can create a PS1 script and then utilize this PS2 exe process, I guess you could call it, which will then will compile and translate your PowerShell script into a standalone executable. That's what I most commonly use if we do end up making some kind of executable. I think it's the easiest way. You can also ask ChatGPT to help you out, and maybe they can help you in making a script if that's something that you want to do. So in that, then that is how we're going to encrypt the files on the endpoint. And then last but not least, it's not ransomware if there's no ransom note, because how are they going to pay you? So we have then a ransomware note that we have down here at the bottom that was pulled from CTI. You put that in your virtual file system, you download it, and then you start Notepad, which will then launch that. It will then launch that ransomware note for the end user to see. Right. So that is essentially how you would go ahead and emulate just the ransomware piece of this. The next piece on here, just some independent practice, just to go through the rest of the emulation plan and kind of translate your different pieces as is. And then we have in here how to run a custom campaign, which is the same way that you ran the campaign earlier on, right? So sorry we don't have enough time for all that, but does anyone have any questions on that? Does that all kind of make sense?
Did anyone try any other behaviors outside of the few we listed?
Sense. Okay. Awesome.
All right, let's talk about some detections, Tyler. What do we got?
Gotta stand up. All right. So, so then the next part kind of naturally, or the next organic flow kind of that you should see is the detection piece, right? Essentially, this workshop is kind of like a mini purple team exercise. So now we've done the CTI, we have emulated the threat, we've deployed it on our endpoint, we're infected with ransomware. Outside of our ransomware note, what are we able to see? So to do the detection piece, we'll kind of do a quick precursor in threat hunting. So threat hunting at the most basic level is just actively looking for the adversary, actively looking for malicious activity or malicious indicators. The two main approaches to threat hunting are reactive and proactive. Reactive is waiting until something happens and then looking, obviously, and then proactive is just continually hunting for the bad guy, kind of on your own, actively looking for them without alerts or kind of precursors, right? And then for those that have never used, those who have never used a seam, that is where we are going to be hunting for this adversarial behavior. We recommend for all defensive analysts, defensive cyber operators, whatever the term is that you want to use, to send your logs to a seam. It, it is a centralized view, real-time monitoring. It will aid in your threat detection and incident response. You can have your historical logs in there. It's scalable. It's all in one spot. You can configure alerts and things like that. It really makes it a lot easier to hunt through an enterprise in your seam. Going machine to machine and pulling logs is cumbersome, difficult, exhausted. I mean, I've seen people literally go machine to machine, downloading logs, putting it in an Excel document, and making a pivot table, trying to find the bad guy. It's not a great way to do it. Get a seam. They have free ones out there. Get your stuff in the seam. It's making it a lot easier to hunt on. And that's what we're going to show for our detection pieces here. So if you've never used a seam or Splunk, this is just a very quick Kickstarter into how to utilize it. You are going to want to start your queries wider and then kind of narrow them in as you get more specific results back, because if you go too specific all at once, you might miss something, or there could be a minor change on the endpoint, or like a misspelling, or something like that, that you could completely miss what you're looking for. We'll talk more about that here in a little bit. But the most basic way to start it is with field value pairs, is how I like to think about it. So you are saying that this field should match or not match this value. Not match is a exclamation point and equal sign, which I think you should see on that second one there. So in this, we want our command line field to match the value of who am I, and our parent image to not equal cmd.exe. And then if you notice the asterisks on either side or in the beginning of cmd.exe, that means a wildcard. So that means that anything before or after, we don't care. We just need it to contain the phrase who am I, or contain /cmd.exe. And then next up, we can put a little more logic into our search outside of just those field value pairs. And we'll do that using some Boolean operators, some Boolean logic, such as and, or, not. So instead of just looking for command line arguments of who am I, we want to see if it has who am I or ipconfig as the command line arguments, or we want to see who am I command line arguments that are not ran by a user named admin, right? Or you could change that to maybe they're not in a group called admin or something like that. Of note for this, the and is implied. So if you don't see an operator in there, it's and. It's just very cumbersome to have to write it out 100 times. And then the last one that we're going to talk about is just ways to group the data. So the main ways to do that are stats and table. Table will display the fields that you want it to show, and stats will provide a grouping of the fields. Stats has a little bit more nuance. We're not really going to get into it in this because we could talk about it for a long time. So we'll mainly be focused on table, which again will just show you the fields that are pertinent. So an example of a full search for that, would be is our search down there at the bottom, which would be index, which is the field, equals main, and our source is sysmon. Source is typically where you get your log from, so like sysmon, security events, your EDR, CrowdStrike, whatever it is. And then the event code is 1. Event code is process creation inside of sysmon, and the command line contains ping, and the image is not ping. And then we table out those results to show parent image, and command line. And then this is what it looks like when you actually run it. And there we see that some results are returned. But again, the easiest way to do it, not to overcomplicate it, is field and value. Where is the field they should be looking, and what is the value that you want to see there? You could also just do a keyword search without specifying a field. In real life, I would not recommend doing that because it's very exhaustive on your system. But in a lab environment, you want to just asterisk, who am I, asterisk, go ahead and do it. Just don't tell anybody that I told you that. And then up next, if you are, back it up. Another great way to perform threat hunting is to utilize Sigma. Sigma is going to allow you to take an already pre-written detection that's written in a standard format, and you can convert it to hunt on whatever tool you're on. Essentially, if your tool has a query bar, you can translate it in Sigma, right? It's open source. You can write your own Sigma rules. We write Sigma rules all the time. And the two ways that are the easiest to find them is on Sigma HQ's Sigma's GitHub page, which is the official repo of Sigma, or on detection.fyi, which sources Sigma rules from a bunch of different places. So to utilize Sigma, you need to find a rule. To do that, like I said, you can go to those two links I put in the chat, but did not send to everybody. Sorry about that. I will change it. Everyone. There we go. Do that. Go to one of those two links. You can search in the top bar, keyword search for what you're looking for, or into detection.fyi. It's the same way. You just search for it, and the list of results come up that match. Our rule here is titled compress data and lock with password for exfiltration with 7-zip. And if you look closely on the detection, you'll see that it's focusing on command line arguments, image description, and original file names related to 7-zip. So you take this rule, copy it, you go over to one of the converters. We're going to use converter.io in our example. You're going to paste your rule on the left. We're going to select Splunk as our backend. If you are utilizing a different tool to search, you would just change that backend to whatever it is, CrowdStrike, MDE, Elastic, Kibana, whatever it is. So it will automatically translate it once the rule is in there. And then you copy the detection query on the right, you paste it into Splunk, and boom, detected. We found the bad guy. We did it. It's that simple. It's not really always that simple. The rules need certain logs to be in place. They could need some modifications, but as a general rule, utilizing Sigma to kind of help you get started or to look for a specific thing, or if you are a defensive cyber operator, analyst, detection engineer, blue side, whatever it is that your title is, it is also probably worth it to just continually look at Sigma HQ and see the new rules coming out, because they come out with new stuff all the time based off of CTI and reporting and things like that. So it's a really great tool. We have a whole workshop about it that is as long as this workshop is. We could talk about it all day. And then just some things I wanted people to be a little wary about is focusing on keyword detections, because they can be very easily bypassed by an adversary. So like in our example here, you see that an adversary is essentially trying to ascertain who they are. So they run both who am I, and then they will utilize the environment variables to also pull that information back. But you can see in our logs, or in our Splunk query on the left, that if we just search for who am I with asterisks on either side, only one of those ways show up. So having keyword detections, you can have some misses because things are logged different ways based off what an adversary is doing. Or if they ran it via upshell or unmanaged PowerShell, it would show up differently than just running it in that straight up command line, right? So just be kind of cognizant of that. And then kind of to alleviate that, we like to focus on state-based detections. So that's hunting for changes to your actual endpoint itself. So just because you can't see the command line action occurring, like we saw in that previous step, you can see the actions change to your system. So in this example here, we are creating a scheduled task called Microsoft Xbox U via the upshell module. Again, upshell is unmanaged PowerShell, so it's not logged in your typical security log or sysmon or things like that. You need to have either script block logging or some other form of PowerShell logging or in-memory EDR, something like that for it to log this activity. So on the argument, or in the Splunk query on the top, we see that we're just searching for command line arguments that we would expect to see for scheduled task creation, either via PowerShell or command prompt. This has no results because, again, it's running through upshell, and the logging is different, right? And that's not only Upshell. Other ways can do that if you perform other things in memory or things like that. But so if you're just looking for the command line activity and you don't have it logged, you can't see it. If you stop right here, you wouldn't even know that this service was created or that any activity happened. So we like to focus on, again, what's written to the endpoint, what's written to disk, because you can't get rid of, even if you get rid of what's on the disk, it's still logged that that occurred, right? So in the bottom example, when a scheduled task is created, a file is created inside of those tasks directories that we have listed out there. You cannot have a service. You cannot have a new service or a service running without that file being created. That's where it pulls it from. So if you change your search around a little bit to monitor those directories, and if a new service is created, it will be written there. So you're able to see that service being created, that state base changed, even though we don't have command line visibility over what's happening, right? So again, just like to focus on state-based detections as much as you can. They're a much higher fidelity alert, and the detection is a little more true, if that makes sense. But with that, that takes us into our final lab, which is detecting adversarial behavior. So we're going to hunt in Splunk to try to identify some of the procedures from our campaigns. I don't know if everybody was able to get to all of them, but the one we ran in the beginning should show some logs. And there might even be some logs left over from previous workshops and stuff in there. So heading over to the hunting for emulated behaviors, it initially will have you go through and identify that who am I execution we had from our initial scythe create campaign view. And then we're going to hunt for some adversarial behaviors such as system info and sharphound. Depending on how you executed system info, your logs will be different, right? So just like we've been saying all the time, if you ran it with the system info module that relies on Windows APIs to run system info, that's not going to be in our logs. We don't have an EDR in our logs. We will not have any visibility over that. But if you ran it via run or upshell, you might be able to see it. And the same with sharphound. Yeah, it'll just depend on what you ran and what your logs are. We also give some Sigma rules to kind of help you identify system info activity. So you can go ahead and go in there, translate the rules in Sig converter, and then deploy them out onto the environment. So that way you're able to see it. If you didn't run system info and you want to, a very easy way to do it, if you have any active shells still, you just click on the shell, or excuse me, if you have any active campaigns still, you can click the drop down, click on the campaign, click on shell, and wait a second for it to check in. And then just do run system info, and it'll run it. If you don't have any open, you can just create a quick one, or you can create a campaign with just the modules loaded and then run it in the shell if you want. But yeah, if you have one open, recommend doing that or going back in and performing some more of our emulation plan to get some more results. And then next up we have for sharphound. So in this one, we want you to kind of look for the Sigma rules or detections on your own. We have some examples here. Not all of these will work. And that is on purpose to kind of show that just because it says sharphound in the rule doesn't necessarily mean that it will hit on everything that is happening, right? So we have those in there as well as some questions, then just independent practice for you to go ahead and run through some more detections if you would like. You could also just go back to the emulating the threat plan and translating and things like that. And then lastly, we have our conclusion. We have our Scythe workshop page on here if you want to sign up for some other workshops, as well as your CPE on there that you can download and provide to, whatever your certificate authority is to get some continuing education credits or continuing professional education, I think is CPE. It's a lot of acronyms. But yeah, the workshop will be over in about 7 minutes or so, but we'll be hanging on. I have a hard stop in 7 minutes, but you will have another hour, an additional hour after that in this lab environment for you to go in do some more emulations, do some detections, play around in Scythe. We have our pre-configured campaigns, some of them in here as well. So if you go to create campaign, you give it a name, add existing threats. We have some threats already in here that you can click on, add steps, and they will load them up here. You can run those and try to hunt through them or modify these to match what you're trying to do. Things like that. It's essentially yours for the next hour and 6 minutes. So anyone have any questions? I know that I kind of went over a bunch of stuff really fast.
Yeah, and this workshop's an inch deep, a mile wide again, like we said. But there's a lot of good info in here. I know Tyler's got a hard stop here in about 5, but I'll hang on for a while after in case you guys want to continue going through or have any questions.
And with that, but yeah, thanks everybody for hopping on. Hopefully you found some stuff of interest and some stuff you can take back with you. This recording will be up on YouTube in probably a week or so. And we do additional workshops and things like that. So, tell your friends, please come back. This was a lot of fun. Yeah, hope to see you again in the future.
Yeah, surprisingly, this turned out to be, I think, one of my favorite workshops that we have. I like the format.
We get a lot of questions about how do you emulate a threat? Like how do you do it? And this so we get that question a lot. So this was kind of our way to show you zero to hero in gathering the intelligence, making the threat, translating it, deploying it, seeing what you can see. So we're hoping to do some more like this in the future, but just extending the timeout for sure. No, you don't have to use Sigma. It's just a way to look at somebody's detections that they've already made, so you don't have to kind of make the detections up on your own. But no, you don't have to use Sigma. It's just kind of another way to help you get started on threat hunting.
We're big here on collaboration, and this is one of those common, think of it as a common defensive language or framework that everybody can use to share quick detections. So like let's say I found a really novel or cool way to detect how a threat actor is executing who am I? Build a quick Sigma rule, and then I can pass it out to everyone that potentially wants it or that wants to look at it. Or I upload it to the Sigma project as well. We do have a whole workshop on weaponizing Sigma. If that is of interest to you, I would say check that out. Not a problem, Lisa. All right, yeah. Thanks you guys for showing up to the workshop. I don't know if you guys have to bounce or not, but you have more free play time still left in the lab. I'll hang out for a little while longer in case you have any questions. Thanks for attending. Well, everybody dropped. I guess that means we can drop.